What are the 5 biggest immigration mistakes that people make? Hi, I'm Jim Hacking, immigration lawyer practicing law throughout the United States out of our offices in St. Louis, San Diego, and Washington, D.C. In this video, we're going to take a deeper dive. It's not going to be our normal short video. We're going to go deep on the 5 big immigration mistakes that we see time and time again. You know, I've been practicing law since 2008, and I've been on a ton of interviews and handled tons of cases. I've also done thousands of consults with people who've either screwed up their case or made a mistake or somehow their case is in trouble. And so we are really able to gather up all these mistakes and put it all into one video so that you can hopefully avoid each of these mistakes. And if you stay till the end, we're going to have a bonus. So there's actually going to be a 6th mistake. If you stay all the way to the end, we'll offer you our bonus mistake that you might not have thought about. Mistake number 1, rushing to get their case on file. So when a lot of people start digging into the immigration process, they learn pretty quickly that there are long delays. That makes them want to file their case very quickly. And so instead of taking their time and being very deliberate and thorough in preparing their applications, they just sort of rush through it to try to get it out the door because they want to get that case started. They want to get that receipt date. And I understand that. We understand wanting to get cases out the door, but there's a big difference between sending out a case that is completely ready rather quickly versus just rushing through it and sending out crap. You don't want to rush through it and send out crap. One of the ways this manifests itself is that people don't gather all the documents they need to actually prepare the forms. Before you pull up the online form or the PDF forms, you should be gathering all of the background documents that you're going to need to fill this out correctly. This might include travel proof, this might include visas, this might include I-20s, this might include any kind of proof of prior status, all of your biographical documents. People don't gather all those documents up and then start working on the forms. Instead, they work on the forms and then they go out and go look for the information that they need. And that's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to gather all the documents so you have it all there in front of you and you can be very organized and systematic in answering the questions. People also forget to read every question. They sort of rush through it. They get into a rhythm of answering no to the questions on the forms. They're not being detail oriented. They're not digging into each of the questions, and they're not going back and making sure that they're answering the questions correctly. You need to make sure that you understand the question, that you make sure that you answer it truthfully and completely, and you want to make sure that if you don't understand the question, that might be a sign that you need some help in preparing your application. Another big mistake that we see with people filing too quickly is that they don't have a driver's license at their proper address. You know, any immigrant who is in the United States is required to update their address with USCIS within 10 days of moving. And a lot of times people will file these applications without really doing the work to figure out what their address is, what their driver's license says, and to make sure that everything is consistent. Your address and where you live can impact your case in lots of ways. For green card cases, it might be the address where you are living and where USCIS might come looking for you. If it's for citizenship, you have to have lived in that address for a certain amount of time before applying. So there are lots of rules related to addresses, and when we see people rush through there, or if they use a buddy or a friend's or a cousin's address, that is a big problem. That can lead to real questions on the part of USCIS about whether or not you're telling the truth. And when people rush through it and they just sort of grab an address, that's a bad play. And when people are rushing through, they tend to guess at the answers. They just say, oh, I can just say no to this, or I can say no to that, or yes to this, or I can give them my best guess. Best guesses don't cut it in immigration. You're swearing under oath that everything in your application is true and correct. So if you are rushing through it and just going click, click, clickety-click, and not really thinking things through, you can really screw yourself because they might cross-examine you with your written answers at your interview, whether that's for naturalization or for a green card. So don't guess. If you don't know the answer, pause and find out, and don't submit it until you actually know the correct answer. Speaking of using a friend or a notario or a cousin to help you fill out your applications, this is another thing. People are in such a hurry to get the case out the door that they trust friends who probably are not exactly qualified to be completing the forms. If you are doing this, I encourage you not to do that. I encourage you to find someone who's a licensed attorney, who knows what they're doing, who's an experienced immigration lawyer, to make sure that you fill out your forms completely and that you're not relying on people who may or may not know the law and may not know how to fill out the form completely. The last problem caused by rushing your case out the door is that people sometimes file too early. They might file for their citizenship or for the removal of conditions on their green card too early. You know, there's certain deadlines or openings when you're eligible to file, and we have seen cases where people file a day or two early. And the problem there is that USCIS takes the money, they process the case, and you're waiting that whole waiting time like everybody else, a year and a half, 2 years, and then it gets denied because you filed too early. It's not that the system kicks you out. They might let you file it electronically or on paper too early. We've seen it both ways, and then the cases get denied simply because you filed a day or two early. So it doesn't happen all that often, but it does happen, and it's the last way that people sort of screw themselves by rushing through the process. The second big mistake that people make at immigration is that they don't submit enough evidence. Their evidence is too thin. They don't do the work to dig out and gather all the records. Of course, it's your burden as the immigrant to demonstrate that you are eligible and entitled to the benefits sought. USCIS doesn't have to do your work for you. They don't have to go out and request documents. This is all on you. So if you don't submit enough evidence, you're really going to set yourself up for either problems at the interview, for delays in your case, or for outright denials. So absolutely need to make sure that you gather all the evidence that's requested. This begins with the evidence that is requested in the forms themselves. For every application, they'll tell you some of the background information that you need to submit. When it comes to documents, you also need to make sure that you have all documentation that the foreign national has been properly admitted to the United States, if they are in the United States, and that they have maintained their status if they have done so. So again, you always want to show that to the extent that you can follow the law, that you followed all the rules and regulations related to your non-immigrant visa status, and that you've done everything to maintain your status. So you want to show to USCIS that you are a rule follower, that you are properly applying for this benefit, that you're eligible for it. And one of the ways that you need to make sure of that is giving them all the documentation of you having maintained your status and having been properly admitted to the United States. You also need to submit all the documentation that shows that you are legally eligible to marry if you are married. So your marital history is going to need to be documented. If you've been married and divorced 3 times before, you're going to need all of your marriage certificates and all of your divorce decrees, or if you're a widow, you're going to need proof that your prior spouse has been deceased. These are the kinds of documents that you need to make sure that you always submit, and you want to get all that at the beginning. You don't want to wait for a request for evidence somewhere along the line during the case. You want to have all that before you submit. So if you say to yourself, I can't find some old divorce decree, you're going to have to get it, so you might as well get it before you file, because sometimes they only give you 30 days or a little bit longer to obtain and submit those documents, and if your case is already on file, that can be a real problem. For many applications, you're also going to need to submit accurate financial information. So if you are a married couple and you're trying to demonstrate the validity of your marriage, documentation such as bank statements, tax returns are important, not only to show that you are earning an income, that you're self-sufficient, that you're paying your taxes, but also that you are commingling your money and you're living your lives as a married couple would ordinarily. So the financial aspects, paying your taxes is also important for citizenship. So the financial aspects of, this life that you have, that you're trying to demonstrate to USCIS that you are following the rules, your financial documents are always going to be really important. So you might as well, again, start trying to gather that stuff up before you file. If you need to get tax transcripts, you can do that later, but you're going to want to bring all that to whatever interview you have, and to make sure that if they ask for it, you're there and ready to have it and to be able to hand it over to them quickly. The last type of documentation that we see people not submit enough of is, of course, marital evidence. Now, we have handled hundreds, if not thousands, of marriage-based green card and spouse visa cases, and we have developed a comprehensive list of all the types of marital evidence that we sometimes submit in our cases, and you can get that for free if you go to hackinglawpractice.com/marital evidence. So MARITAL-evidence, EVIDENCE. If you go there, you can download for free our list of all the marital type evidence that you would need, both for your initial filing and for your interview. We have lots of other videos that discuss that, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but just know that more often than not, people don't submit enough marital evidence, and this is the one time where more is better. So you should definitely plan on submitting more marital evidence and not less. The third major mistake that we see people making at USCIS, they don't practice for the interview enough. And I'm not talking about, trying to memorize marriage-based questions. I'm talking about actually preparing for the interview. So You know, we have tons of videos. We have a sample interview for green cards based on marriage. If you look at our YouTube channel, you can really find out a lot about what's going to happen at the interview. So number one, I would spend a lot of time on our YouTube channel watching all the videos that you can about our marriage-based green card cases. We also have tons of videos about the citizenship interview. So at an interview, you're going to be sitting across from an officer. They're going to swear you in and put you under oath, and they're going to make you promise that everything you tell them is the truth. And then they're going to go over your application. So there's no big secrets, no big surprise usually. If your case is straightforward, they're just going to go over the forms and ask you the questions therein. The best way to prepare for that then isn't to read over the questions in your mind over and over. The real way to do it is to have someone read you those questions out loud. So if it's a marriage-based green card case, you should have the U.S. citizen ask you the green card questions, have your spouse ask you all the admissibility questions. There's a big difference between hearing it out loud and reading it on paper. So, of course, we always prepare our clients by going over the applications and going over questions that we've sort of identified that come up a lot at interviews, and you want to do this too. There's no substitute to listening to the questions over and over. I remember I once had a client whose wife was from China. She wasn't a native English speaker, and her English was a little rough, so he actually recorded all of the questions from the I-130 and all the questions from the I-45 and put it on a CD for her, and she could listen to it in the car whenever she was driving around. That's how you prepare. That's how you get ready. That's how you win your case, is that you make sure that you have practiced the questions. I'm not talking about rote memorization. I'm not talking about, in a marriage case, making sure that you memorize all the questions about what color your carpet is and all that stuff. I'm talking about getting ready for the inadmissibility questions, getting ready for the biographic questions, so that when the question is asked, you're ready to go. You're not going like this. You're not surprised by any questions. You're not sort of just thinking off the top of your feet. You've practiced these questions, you know how to answer them, and you've identified the issues in your case. So many people spend time calling my office, getting on our Immigration Answers live show, doing whatever, complaining and just befuddled by the processing times. And I know that the cases are taking a long time, but you should use that time to your advantage. There's nothing you can do about the processing times. You might as well use this time to properly prepare for your interview in the way that I just mentioned. One of the other big problems with the interview itself is that people don't know their case. They don't know what they're asking for. They don't know the benefit that they're seeking. They're really sort of disorganized, and they just sort of show up unprepared and sort of almost unaware of what's going on. Now, of course, many people know exactly what's going on, and they're dialed in, and they're the ones who are going to be more likely to get the benefit that they're seeking. But too many people just are sort of lackadaisical about it and just sort of show up and don't really have a firm understanding of what they're doing and why they're there, and they don't know the facts of their case. They don't know, what's the benefit sought, what's the status that the person currently has, what have they done inside the United States, what's been their status, and they really need to know it backwards and forwards. And that's something that we see people make mistakes with, is that they just don't know their case well enough. The last way that people aren't prepared properly for their interview is that they don't have their documents organized. You want to make sure that when you're sitting across from that officer, if they ask for a document, that you not only have the original, but that you have a copy for the officer. You don't want them making copies during your interview. You don't want them to get up during the interview to go make copies, because they're going to think up more questions. You want this thing to go as quickly as possible. You want to be able to share your documents. You want to be able to show them the original. You want to have a copy already made for them. If you can even put a 2-hole punch at the top so they can just slide it right into their file, that's going to be best. So having a firm grasp of where all your documents are, that they're there for easy access. I've seen people do too much stuff like laminate them or put them into sleeves. You don't want that. You want to be able to get them quickly and hand them over. So I think the best thing to do is just to have the original with a copy of each one, and then just have a sticky note. You don't need to bring every piece of paper from your life, but you do need to bring the important documents, and you want to be able to access them quickly at the interview. All right, the fourth problem that we see people make when it comes to their immigration case is talking too much at their interview. Don't talk so much at your interview. The less you say, the better. If you can answer your question with a yes or a no, that's going to be your best bet. And we've seen so many videos of people at their interviews, or we've talked to so many people who think, I can just explain this, I'll just tell my whole life story, I'll just sort of anticipate where the officer is going. The officer knows what information they need to get, and they want you to be as concise as possible. They don't want you talking all day. If you talk all day, you're just going to lead to more questions. So when you get the question, pause for a second. You don't have to say the first thing that comes out of your mouth. If you can answer with a yes or a no, you should answer with a yes or no. If the officer asks you what time it is, don't tell them you're wearing a watch, or vice versa. If they ask you if you're wearing a watch, don't tell them what time it is. Just answer the question, yes, I'm wearing a watch, or it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Be very specific with your answers. Don't try to anticipate where the officer is headed. The officer knows what information they need to obtain, and they will get it from you themselves. They will direct the interview. They've done many, many more of these than you have, and you're not that clever. So let them sort of lead the way and answer your questions as concisely and as quickly as possible. Another mistake we see people make inside the interview itself is when they have the wrong mindset. They're there thinking to themselves, well, I'm not sure that I really belong here. I'm not really sure that I deserve this benefit. I'm not really sure, if this officer is going to be mean to me. That's the wrong mindset. You are there for a reason. You are there to get an immigration benefit. You have paid the fees. You have filled out the forms. You've done everything that you're supposed to do. You've followed every rule. You've complied with every regulation, and you have every right to be sitting in that chair. So when you're in there, sit confidently, answer confidently, be confident. Know that at the end of this process, whether it's today or down the road, that you're going to get this case approved, and that this officer will need to approve it. So walk in with that mindset. Walk in with that body stature. Walk in there as confident as you can be. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a bully. But you can be as confident as you are that you are there because you have followed the law. You know the rules. You know what's going on here, and you have every right to be there. That's the right mindset. One last problem with talking too much and how people handle themselves at the interview is the fact that sometimes people really get nervous and they try to fill the silence with their answers. They try to just sort of keep the conversation going. So at any interview, there's going to be many times where there's nothing happening. The officer might be looking in the file, the officer might be looking something up on the computer, the officer might step out for a minute, and you might want to try to fill those silences with your talking. Don't do that. Do that at your next dinner party. Do not do it at your interview. Let the silences be your friend. Let the silences be your chance to reset. Let the silences be your chance to say, oh, well, this interview's been going sort of the way I anticipated because I prepared by going over my applications, all the paperwork, I know my case. Let me take this breather and make sure that I'm ready for the next question with a smile on my face. So don't feel like you have to rush into the silences. Just let the silence be there and let the silence be your friend. That's sort of the fourth mistake we see people making, is when they just talk too much, and there's lots of reasons that we just discussed for that. The fifth way that we see people making mistakes when it comes to their immigration case is not knowing their immigration history and not knowing what they've told immigration officials in the past. So in other words, they don't know their past. They don't know how they got here. They don't remember what they said to get their non-immigrant visa. They don't know what they said in prior applications for visit visas. USCIS and the State Department's biggest trick right now is figuring out what you did in your prior case and using that against you. So we've seen case after case after case where the agencies will say, oh, we believe this current relationship, but we're more concerned about your prior relationships or your prior applications. So we see them using things like prior attempts to get a visit visa. We see them using prior marriages or prior applications for an immigration benefit with USCIS. And they're digging deep on those prior applications, and they're using those prior applications against you. So we see them sort of highlighting things, and this can even happen at the citizenship stage where they go all the way back to the visit visa or whatever way you originally obtained immigration benefits in the United States, and they dig in deep and they try to find some inconsistency or even a perceived inconsistency in your past, whether it's your criminal past, your immigration past, your education past, your work history past, your status past, and using that against you. So you have to know your whole immigration benefits and history. So that's why you'll see, if you watch our Immigration Answers live show, I'll always start with someone's original immigration status. I don't talk about just the application that they're applying for now. I go all the way back to the beginning, and I ask them about where they came from, how they got here, what benefits they have ever sought, what they obtained, and we want to make sure that whatever we're saying in this application is consistent with what we said in prior applications, or that we have a really damn good reason why things that we're saying now, say in our naturalization application, might not exactly match things we said in a visit visa application or an immigrant visa application at the embassy or in a prior green card application. So you got to know things backwards and forwards, and you got to know your own immigration history very, very well. And when it comes to not knowing your past, you need to make sure that if you have maintained your status, that you know that status that you maintained, that you, say for instance, came here on a B1, B2, changed to an F1, went from an F1 to OPT, went from an OPT to H1B, from an H1B to a green card holder, and from a green card holder to your citizenship. You need to know those dates, you need to know how it happened, you need to make sure that it complied with the law, you need to make sure that USCIS handled those cases correctly and that everything you said to them was true. So if you've been in status, you need to make sure that you're able to explain that properly to the officer and that you can document it. Same goes with any time of being out of status. If you're married to a U.S. citizen and you're planning on that being forgiven, or if it's already been forgiven because you've gotten a green card and you're now applying for citizenship, you're still going to need to be able to talk about it. You're still going to need to be able to explain it. If you were out of status and the officer asks you about it, you need to be able to explain in a reasonable manner why you fell out of status. And then the one thing with being out of status that they're going to want to know is, did you ever lie to anybody? Did you make any misrepresentations? Did you ever tell someone that you were a U.S. citizen? Did you ever lie to get a job? And these are the kinds of things that you need to know when it comes to your history. You need to know the good stuff, you need to know the bad stuff, and you need to know everything in between. All right, so this brings us to our bonus mistake. This is the sixth mistake, and that's that people don't get help when their case isn't approved on the spot. So if your case is not approved on the spot, it may be just a matter of paperwork, it may just be a matter of the officer being busy or new or needing to run the case past the supervisor. But if a couple weeks go by and nothing's happened, you might start thinking about needing help. And the way you really know you need help is when you receive what's called a request for evidence or a notice of intent to deny. So a request for evidence is when USCIS lets you know that there's something missing in your case, that you haven't filed a complete case, that there is some document or some information that USCIS needs you to go get and give to them before a final decision can be made. A notice of intent to deny is a little bit more serious. That is when USCIS has made at least an initial determination that they don't think they're going to give you the immigration benefit that you are seeking. They're going to give you one last chance. They might have already sent you a request for evidence, an RFE, that we just discussed, and they may have received that response, and now they're leaning towards denying your case. They're going to give you one last shot to sort of submit that. If you receive a request for evidence, or if you receive something called a notice of continuance, or if you receive a notice of intent to deny, I would argue that you then need an immigration lawyer. Unless it's for updated medical, which is relatively simple, you just need to go get an updated I-693 or get another vaccination or something like that. If you get anything other than that, from an RFE or a notice of intent to deny, that is when you need to drop everything, stop handling this case by yourself, and go see an experienced immigration lawyer. And that's really the biggest bonus mistake that we see, is that people try to handle RFEs or notice of intent to deny on their own. I don't really understand why people do that. I don't think that people should go through the process from start to finish without an immigration lawyer, but why in the hell would you keep going if you already know that your case is on life support? USCIS is wanting to pull the plug on your case to perhaps send you to deportation court for perhaps just giving you a negative response. And to think that you're going to be able to navigate this against the federal government without the help of an experienced immigration lawyer, to me, just seems crazy. The thing you need to remember is that at this point, they want to deny the case. They're leaning towards denying it, and you're going to have to fight. And I don't think you're going to be able to make that uphill battle fight. It's almost as like, at first, say they're going to give you a 50-50 chance, and then once you're at a notice of intent to deny, you're almost like at a 20% chance of success. So you really need to think long and hard about getting help, or your case might very well get denied. We hope you found all these tips helpful, these 5 big mistakes, plus our bonus mistake that people make every single day at USCIS. We hope you do everything you can to prevent these. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you join us on our Immigration Answers live show. You can get our schedule every week, comes out when we're going to go live. We usually go live 4 or 5 days a week, where we try to answer your immigration law related questions. And then, of course, we have our Immigrant Home Facebook group. That's one of the places where the show goes live, along with our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or need to get a hold of us, our phone number is 314-961-8200. You can email us, info@hackinglawpractice.com. Be sure to join us in our Facebook group, which is called Immigrant Home. And if you like this video, we ask that you please share it out on social. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.